a big reason why they're on that way, Matt, is Ondrej Palat. We've got Justin Williams, Mr. Game 7. Should we just start calling Ondrej Palat Mr. Conference Final? 15 career goals in the conference final round, which is absolutely amazing. And you look at his playoff production, he's sort of, I don't want to call him the forgotten unrestricted free agent, but he's on our top 50 UFA board, and these playoffs show why he deserves a pretty high ranking. But I wonder if in some way, with the way that these playoffs are unfolding, that the Lightning just say, you know what, this guy is so critical to our success. There's no chance that we could let him walk in free agency. We've got to find a way to pay him. I could certainly see that being the case. It's always a tough dance for Julien Brisebois trying to navigate that cap in Tampa, but he's been such a big part of what they've done and clearly also a John Cooper favorite.
That's right. And if you look at those 11 game winners among active players, only Joe Pavelski and Evgeny Malkin have more game-winning goals in the playoffs among active NHLers. He's been tremendous. And what's interesting to me about Palat is the consistency. In the regular season for his career, 55 points per 82 games. In the playoffs, 54.5 points per 82 games. You get the same player all season long, very consistent, very reliable at both ends of the ice. He can play on a scoring line, but he's defensively responsible. The question for the Lightning is, are you going to have to make a decision between Ondrej Palat and Nick Paul? Nick Paul is 4 years younger than Palat. He's probably going to cost, give or take, I think half if you look at the AAV that Palat has commanded. And if you look for a comparable, I'm looking at Blake Coleman, who is the same birth year as Palat in 1991. He gets 6 years times $49 million with that sort of boost in price because he's a winner. And if Ondrej Palat ends up winning 3 straight Stanley Cups, I think the Coleman contract is probably the floor. So the Lightning, I think they can fit him under the cap, but it will mean having to say goodbye to Nick Paul.
So I don't think Nick Paul's going to come cheap either. He had asked the Ottawa Senators for 4 years times $3 million. They weren't able to meet that demand for $12 million. Now Nick Paul goes there, has elevated his game in the playoffs, and has shown that he's probably going to get more than that. If you're Palat, though, as successful as this run has been in Tampa, and as much as you'd love to stay there and keep trying to win, if you do win a third straight Stanley Cup, do you just take the money at that point and say, you know what, I've loved my time here, but this is my one major contract that I'm going to have in my career to really, set myself up for life?
I think it's a fair question. If you look at the AAV, I believe it's $5 million he's been at for his current contract. And yes, of course, we know with the tax breaks in Tampa, it's a little bit more. It's the equivalent of a bit more. But I think you could argue he's delivered far more than that in terms of value. Maybe he's been a $6 or $6.5 million player. And this is his chance to make sort of his set for life kind of money. You have to think about that if you already have the 3 cup rings.
Yeah, it's going to be a fascinating debate for Ondrej Palat and for the Lightning themselves. What direction do they go? I think you see Julien Brisebois, the way that he's been able to turn over that third line and kind of constantly find those players to plug in there. Maybe it's harder to find a Palat than to just get new blood on that third line, but they also gave up a lot to get Nick Paul, and certainly they have Brandon Hagel under contract, so he'll be remaining. But man, not an easy spot to be in for the Lightning. But I guess if you win a third cup, you go, we'll figure it out after the fact.